Welcome to this webinar on communications planning, everyone. My name is Peter Roaf. I'm chair of the District 5040 Public Relations and Public Image Committee. I'm also a past president of the Rotary Club of Ladner and continue as public relations chair and webmaster for the club. The agenda for this session is we're going to cover briefly Rotary's public image strategy and then move on to Rotary's public relations, the process. And that includes areas such as research, action planning, communications, and evaluation. Just some housekeeping. Everyone's indicated as in listen-only mode. If you have a question to pose, if you could write it in the communication or question panel. And we'll come to question breaks in the session, and we'll try and take 2 or 3 questions maybe at that time verbally, but for the sake of time or for everyone, we'll move through those reasonably quickly. This session is going to be recorded, so people can refer to it afterwards. The purpose of this model is to cover a full communications plan. Possibly it could be several months, a year, or maybe even longer or ongoing, and it can be scaled up and down depending on the size of your project, but to take it out to the limit, so to speak, this needs to go into some of the detail of communication planning. So the first part of this session is, I have to warn you, is a bit sort of heavy, but I hope we can get through that fairly quickly, and look forward to your comments as we come along and questions. So Rotary's public image is our reputation, our brand. Rotary's public relations or communications strategy is to build public image and relationships so that we can achieve our club strategy. So the two go hand in glove. One leads to the other, and one relies on the other. A strong positive public image is the outcome we seek in planning the process of communication and acting on that planning with the tools of communications. The strategy is to influence Rotarians and our fellow community members to think and act in support of Rotary. Our brand, our reputation comes from what we do or achieve. Our brand also comes from how we do it. When members and people in our communities see and hear the symbols, logos, and words associated with Rotary, we want them to think people of action in high value service to the community and the world, with integrity, through fellowship, an organization worth joining to give back to my community, and worth associating with and supporting with funds and time. The Rotary logo is not our brand on its own, but it is a symbol of it, of Rotary's value and integrity, which people think and feel when they see it. Because our logo is so important as a symbol of our brand, we want to make sure we apply the Rotary logo in a consistent way in keeping with Rotary International guidelines whenever we work together and when we meet and work with others in our communities. Guidelines for use of our logo and visual identity are available on the Rotary International website under News and Media tab in Brand Center. I think a lot of you would be aware of that. But let's get on to the actual action part of this, the public relations aspect. And so as we work towards building our public image, here is a simple model for communications, planning for public relations, RACE, R-A-C-E. Research and analysis, and that will lead on to action plan. Then acting on that plan, you conduct communications you have chosen to get the job done. And finally, evaluation, often the most neglected part of the process, to learn whether you actually got the job done and to learn from it. Often the tendency is to jump into the communications themselves before determining goals about what needs to be achieved. First, you need to do your research and analysis about your target audiences and figure out what they are doing and thinking now and what you need them to do in support of Rotary. There is no single mass audience for the club or any specific project. And I think a lot of us who have been in business and professional lives know that, but it's certainly worth mentioning. The target audiences need to be segmented. That is, for each target audience identified as being helpful to the club in achieving its goals, there needs to be some research, analysis, and strategy as to what the audience needs. And each audience can be broken down into subsets to provide more definition for communication needs. And here's a couple of examples of that. Survey work is a conversation with your target audience, whoever that might be. It might be your members or people in the community. So when it comes to audience research, a good place to start is a survey. Just start asking people with quick polls or even discussions in a group from your target audience, or conduct a written survey with statistical responses and comment sections, or both. Asking the right questions in the right way will produce responses that are not only an accurate reflection of opinion, but results which can be acted on. SurveyMonkey is one service which can advise you and then help you set up your written survey, and there are other systems. To illustrate the points about research and other aspects of public relations, I'm going to take the example of the Ladner Rotary Splash Park, which my club is developing with the City of Delta and our various sponsors. So if we take that model and look at who the audience is and break that down, we've got Rotary members who are, there's 3 clubs in Delta, the corporation or City of Delta, sponsors, Delta families, community groups, children's organizations, and business community. So there's quite a mix of target audiences for the Splash Park. What are the groups and groups within them? What are their needs in relation to the Splash Park and Rotary? How can a relationship between the club and the target audience benefit both? So if you give those thoughts as you work through your plan, what do they need to get out of it, as well as what do you, the club, need to get out of it? And then for each group, if you break it down saying, well, this group, the description of the group and perhaps what they're thinking and doing, what do you want them to do? What is the desired action? So you need to set your goals on that for each group. So you're developing all these streams through your plan about depending on who you're trying to reach and in what areas of your target audience. Again, communication has a purpose of influencing thinking and behavior in some way. So it's not just a question of sending things out, it's a question of trying to influence people and get them behind your project. So here's what your analysis might look like in a document. In this part of the audience or stakeholder analysis, for example, there are Delta families of all ages who might benefit from the Splash Park to be considered. You can work your way through each target audience. And this model can scale up for a large organization or down to a small one. Then there's the aspect of the progression through with your audiences. Communication is usually not achieved with a one-shot message. It's a step-by-step building process as you build a two-way relationship with each audience. Awareness is often stated as a communication goal, but that's just the first stage. Again, communication needs to have a behavioral purpose. Once aware, an audience can be prepared to understand more about the project. And once they understand more about the project and see its purpose and value, they are prepared to make a commitment to support it and take some level of ownership in the project. Then they can decide or learn how to take action in support of the project in response to your call to action or by their own initiative. So it suggests here now that you go through, you don't reach your target audience once, you go back and assess each time that you're getting where you want them to get to in terms of eventually getting people to act in support of what you're doing. So if you analyze and plan with audience segments in mind and this simple model of progression, you're well on your way to communication strategy.
I have a question here, Peter.
Yeah.
I have a question. And
Okay.
the question is, when you shared the logos, were they in accordance with the brand guidelines? It seemed like they were hard to read.
Yes, they were. So that's part of our committee's work. Our PR committee is to make sure we're using the logo in the latest logo in the correct form. So if anyone sees that something's out of order, please let me know.
Okay, and another question. What is your thought on social media and club bulletins?
Well, we're going to come to that in a little while. And then there are 2 other webinars that are following this one in the coming weeks, which are addressing those subjects. So if we could hold that question and maybe raise the question in that section.
Mm-hmm. And another one, did you follow through with the communication grid for the Ladner Splash Park and follow through with stakeholders?
To some extent, the project isn't over actually, but I've sort of taken forays in. We've gone to visit business association. We've been in touch with some other people in the community, but it certainly could, in terms of the evaluation, I'll probably point out at the end of the line what we could have been doing and didn't do, as well as what we did do. So yes, we've been trying to follow that to a good extent.
Okay.
Take one more.
One more question. I will. So there's some people asking, are we able to obtain this package you presented, or are you preparing a template that the club can work from?
Well, we'll be able to share this presentation with parts in it. Again, if anyone wants more information, more detail, I can certainly help them out afterwards. But one way or another, these templates and so forth would be available to clubs.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move along. So as we complete the R for research in the RACE formula, we've dealt with the questions. Now we move on to the A for the action part, action planning. So the strategy of the Ladner Rotary Club was to build a splash park by 2018. So that was the strategy. So the communication goal is to achieve a high level of commitment to the splash park among children and their families, parents and grandparents in Ladner and area, and for that matter among our sponsors and others, city leaders and so forth. So that's our basic communication goal. As you work your way towards a communications action plan, it can be helpful to think about a process of what communications you need to produce and what you need to do with them. Then what results you expect to achieve and impact you sought. Again, you are seeking to influence thinking and behavior of individuals and groups. So in terms of inputs, that's develop communications you choose to be most effective and timely in connecting with target audiences, how and when and at what cost. Outputs is the action using the communications you have prepared, reaching the intended audiences, and feedback from those audiences in two-way conversation. Outcomes, what results were achieved? How did the target audiences change their thinking and behavior in relation to what was planned? And impacts, with what change in thinking, with that change in thinking and behavior of target audiences, what was the impact of those outcomes? How was Rotary affected? How was the community affected? So those are, this is helpful in organizing things and what you want put into it and what you're seeking at the end of the day. So with that, so thinking about outputs and impacts, start thinking about what indicators are you going to select to determine that you're achieving results with your various audiences. So going back to the inputs, outputs. Inputs, for instance, you may choose the number of e-news articles or issues published, website posts, news releases issued, advertisements placed, or events posted with budget of time and money. For outputs, results of your inputs, you may choose number of members reached, not just receiving, but reading or seeing if possible. With e-news issues or number of website, Facebook, Twitter visits, news media articles published, survey responses, responses to event posts, potential member inquiries. For outcomes, which are the results of your outputs, what indicators will tell you that a desired change actually happened? Survey responses may indicate change in attitude or behavior, especially if taken before communications activity, then afterwards, or at least afterwards, if not before and afterwards. For impacts, results of your outcomes, what indicators in the club strategy indicate that the desired impact was actually achieved? Perhaps number of new members, increased sponsors, project completion, and service provided. Achievement of club strategy through communication is what you're seeking in the end, of course. So with that, some measures, some examples here. Here are some measures or indicators planned as possible communications about the splash park. There could have been more, perhaps. Which ones reflect the most important output and impact for the project and in return for Rotary? So once you've settled on the most realistic or feasible measures, then what are the targets you're going to set in the measure to indicate that you've achieved your goal? So what are the targets? And then here's an example for the splash park. Some possible targets we set. Some in white are outputs, others in yellow are outcomes. I don't know if you can see the differentiation on your screen, but the first 4 are outcome targets and the second 4 are output targets. So once you've established that and where you're headed sort of statistically, if you like, now's the time to have a bit of fun about brainstorming. You're going brainstorm with a group. And anything goes, as you know, in brainstorming, and then you can review your list and rank them for feasibility. And here's some sample ideas that came up from members when we talked about reaching members' community for the splash park. And highlighted in yellow are actions with greater potential for achieving desired outcomes and which are also more feasible in terms of timing and available funds and members' volunteer time. So the ones with the ticks beside them. But hang on to those other ideas you selected because they could be useful for future round of planning and more feasible at a later date. So once you've got, now you have your measures and your targets and ideas about how what you're going to achieve, how you're going to achieve those, you get down to your objectives, the measurable objectives for a fiscal year or other defined period at a certain cost based on planning to date. So we have these sample objectives. It indicate not just awareness, but commitment, the target audience by a certain date or within the fiscal year and at what cost. So this is particularly key because this is really the nub of it, right down to these objectives. Are you going to, when you come to evaluate, did you achieve what you set out to achieve? So When you put those planning elements together, this is what the plan might look like. So the value of putting the plan together is that it reminds those involved in the planning how you arrived at the objectives. It also serves as a reference for other club leaders, especially those who join the club or project communications committee in the middle of the project. And finally, when you evaluate the plan at the end of the cycle, you have a format which only requires updating and not reinventing. Again, I can make this available to you afterwards, or you can see this in the repeat of this session. Each communication objective needs its own action plan, so individual steps can be delegated to different committee members for completion by a certain date, within the budget available, or they recommend and in keeping with the overall club or project communication budget. So this is an example of people along the top who were delegated various tasks, and then the various key tasks and subtasks in the action plan. So, so the action to be taken is in the left column, and if there's a cost involved in any of the action steps, it could be included there. The timeline of by when in the second column, and who has agreed to take action in the third column. So it's a standard action plan that you'd see in any planning system. Following the RACE model, we now come to C for communications. A bit more of the fun part, if you like. And post your news on your website as you go. Forget about gathering a collection of news items and publishing once a month or some other period. It's not a printing schedule, it's news as you go. And make sure your social media include brief posts about what you post on your website. Include a link to your website to drive people there. That's what you want to do, is drive them into your website. But have a sort of a consistent look using the Rotary brand, and so that people know if they're going from one to the other, they're with regarding the same club or organization you're dealing with. So in this case, Rotary Club of Ladner looks different on all three, but of course has a similar look. Make sure your members are the first to hear any significant news, at least at the same time as your external audience. When an announcement is made at a club meeting or a speaker visits, then post the news. If an item is urgent, then send out an e-news special announcement right away. For those not attending club meetings, they can catch up with e-news and bulletins as monthly roundups. E-news, issues, and bulletins can round up your website and social media posts as you go, perhaps for the most recent month. You can use your e-news issues for information of value only to your members, such as board meeting highlights and coming events. And you can use your bulletins for information of value of not only to your club members, but to the community. Again, keeping some kind of Rotary identity, keeping with the visual identity guidelines, and something that is consistent in the club, the visuals that you use and so forth. And news releases to local media with photos or just photos with captions should be considered for any more significant announcements. And of course, social media are important because often that's where news media pick up stories if they're following your club. So I would highly recommend you take any opportunity you see to get your news out there. Not all your news releases may be published, but even a photo with a caption goes a long way in getting media coverage in the local newspaper. And there are various other ways to connect advertising. Advertising, in particular, this is a recent launch of the Rotary International People of Action campaign. And there's a lot of great material in that if you explore what's available and adapt it for your own club. There's posters community event calendars, presentations, community groups, radio and TV, and public service announcements. So how do you present your information is very important, not just what you do, what media you use, but how you present it. And when planning your communications, whatever media you're using, as you act on your communications plan, stop thinking about Rotary as the first and most important element. What is the human and community value of your project? What is the human interest? The message about Rotary will come through in its association with the human interest and valued work and human results. This basically sums it up. Seth Godin, some of you may have heard of him. Marketing is no longer about stuff that you make, it's about the stories you tell. And it's all relationships you're developing through various media, not just websites and social media. Rotary's new People of Action advertising campaign is produced in a variety of formats. You can find it in the Rotary International's website Brand Center. Any club should be able to make use of some of the options for newsletter, e-news, website, club banners, advertising in newspapers, billboards, and so on. We should all get behind this campaign and think about how we can make it local as well as international for the sake of our public image. Credit to Rotary International for producing some of these materials that we get to use. And by the way, I'll tell you at the end, but refer to the Rotary District, our district's public relations and public image section of the website to find out a lot of links that may be of use to you. So storytelling can build your club's public image. It helps members tell the Rotary story and connects with our community we are serving. Storytelling helps build relationships. So, what is the need your project is fulfilling and why should people care? What and why is Rotary doing something about that need? Here's an example of a container that was loaded for the Philippines a while ago, and this news release could start that members of the Rotary Club joined together, other clubs in Lower Mainland loaded the shipping container. If you turn that around and talked about, well, what are the benefits of that, doctors will now be able to detect early breast cancer and so on. This is the same sort of basic story, but has more of a human interest angle in it. And while this has more, stresses a bit more about Rotary, it's really talking about the people and the time they've invested in the support of the community and the sponsors and so on as a community effort to generate our $21,000 from our calendar sales in Ladner through the 10th annual calendar sales project.
Hi, Peter. I do have a couple of questions that came through. One of them is, when you are talking about e-news to membership, are you referring to simple emails to all members?
E-news, yes. One way, at least the way I handle it, is e-news goes to our members only, and as I say, it relates to board highlights and other internal matters. And then we publish that once a month and wrap up any news and coming events. The bulletins have some of that in it, but adds a lot more that streams into it from the system. And bulletins round up all the stories that have been posted for the past month on the website. So members will get that. If they haven't been, if they're out of the country or not available, they can find that once a month. And also people from the community subscribe to the bulletin so they can see what you're doing. If they're not visiting your website on a regular basis to see the posts that come up, they at least will get that once a month roundup of news that comes out. So e-news in the Club Runner communications is an area where you'd send out your emails, and then bulletin is where you'd send out that bulletin, which is much more rich in content about Rotary and what the club is doing and planning to do.
Okay. Another question, there was one, and I'm hoping I'll get it correct for you, is who in the club should initiate the communication process for projects with existing members of the club? And this would be to enable the strategic plan to be made.
Well, first of all, the club starts with the board and the members with the strategic plan of the club. From that point, then it could be the president or president-elect, but more likely or advisably the PR chair for the club would then look at the strategic plan and say, what communications do we need to support the strategy of the club, and start using those goals in the strategic plan as your main hooks for your communication. Then you start drilling down and saying, oh, okay, if we're going to, in this, using the example I used earlier, we're going to build the splash park. Well, okay, what are the target audiences? What are the measures, the indicators, and what are the targets we're setting? What are the ways we can get to people that we want to get to, and therefore, what are your objectives? So the who, every club, in theory, should have a PR person or have that responsibility, but I know smaller clubs, it's tough to assign somebody that single role, but it's a team effort in the end, and you get the board involved in some of the planning, and you keep coming back to the board and refining your plan and moving ahead. And you need to get people involved. It's not just that PR person's involvement, it's everyone's involvement to get out and speak about what you're doing and act as ambassadors.
Okay, do you want another question, Peter?
Sure, get one more, please.
Okay. Do you use Club Runner to get your messages out to members, and how effective is this? It may have been answered already, but
Yeah. Well, through your, if you send out emails, e-news, you can go and see how many people have opened, the email. Now, some of that isn't necessarily accurate. So let's say you send out and you've got 40 people in your club, and you send out and 28 people opened it. Well, it's not that, let's say, 12 or 13 people didn't open it. They might have received it and not opened up the picture, if you like. And so sometimes that doesn't register back to the system that the email's being read, but in fact they've seen it. So, but it does give an indication of who's seeing the e-news. And the same thing with the bulletin. When you come to prepare it and assemble all the stories in it, and you're ready to send it, you would obviously want to choose your club members, but also people who have subscribed to your bulletin, and so your friends, if you like, friends of the club, and others who may be on lists that you've developed. They might be sponsors, for instance, of a project you're working on. You want to keep them up to date. So to the communications and the bulletins. And then, of course, once again, there's Facebook. A lot of people follow that, so you want to make sure whatever you're posting on your website is more or less is duplicated or summarized on Facebook with links to your website story, and same with Twitter. And other people are using other social media, and I have to say our club hasn't sort of got into Instagram and other things, but we should, while we're at it, be doing that as well. So evaluation, did we achieve the results set originally, time and budget planned? Evaluation, the E in the RACE formula, is often overlooked, but it's important in assessing the value of the communication plan, what went right, what went wrong or did not happen as planned. At the end of the project, an evaluation of the communications and the communications plan itself will provide some learning for the next project. If it's a multi-year project or ongoing work of the club, then evaluation will help you learn, contribute to your analysis, and help you start the next business cycle. Or if it's a short-term project of weeks or months, evaluation will help the club learn how to do a better job on the next project. And as I mentioned earlier, we haven't come to the end of our splash park project, but we would have to do an evaluation of what we did and didn't do, what we did well and didn't do well, etc. And then we can look on that for future lengthy projects that we're involved in. Or if it's just a short-term thing, if you take little bits of this plan and boil it down to its essence, it'll keep you on the right track of focusing on what you're trying to achieve in terms of your outcomes. So the outcomes of all that activity: new members, female members, young members. Another outcome is sponsors. They want to associate their organizations with Rotary and our members as people of action. They want to associate with the strong business-like public image of Rotary. Sponsors know that the more Rotary does in the community and the more Rotary does to build its public image, the more they will gain. So, evaluation. So here are the results of member opinion surveys from one year to the next. Club members recognize the increased activity and results of club public relations. The horizontal yellow line indicates the midpoint in member opinion, and any result below that line would be considered negative. But as indicated in terms of the public relations area, from one year to the next, there was an increase. And similarly, the increases in positive opinion about specific communications are additional evaluation indicators. These are the indicators and the measures which could be factored into planning and objectives for the next business cycle as well. So you want to see how you're doing year over year if it's a multi-year project, or as I say, if it's ongoing work of the club, just year in, year out. And then this tracking use of your website is useful in telling you which aspects are working well and which not. Does the website add value? Again, more indicators for your communications plan. Same with Twitter. I can't say that we're superstars, our club, in these regards, but you know, it's something we have to keep focusing on. Something I want to do more of is keep focusing on the statistics and how we're doing in that evaluation. So evaluating events by participants is helpful in planning the next event. The survey recognizes audience segments by demographics. Evaluation of communications for the event can be factored into these surveys. This is an example taken from the survey of participants at the 2016 district conference. And some of it seems much the same, but actually if you look at the ranking and the topics and so on. So yes, this relates to an event, but an event is communication, and you might want to evaluate people who participate in your event on various factors. So as long as it's the information is of value, that you can use the information you're getting from your survey after the fact to make decisions with. There's no point in just asking people, was the conference okay or not? Yes or no. You want some more detail, and that you can measure and plan in the future. So as we've reached the E for evaluation, are there any questions on that topic?
Peter, if people are typing a question, I don't see one yet, but I do have a question here
Right.
that was up before. but we didn't get to it, so I'll put it out now.
Good.
On March
Yeah.
8th, we are broadcasting our first What is Rotary broadcast through Coast Cable. It is 30 minutes broken into 3 segments of 8 minutes each. The first 8 minutes is simply what is Rotary. Would the RI material you mentioned be useful? Is there an existing example of a what is Rotary segment?
Well, just off the top of my mind, I know there's a what is Rotary video, or yes, video. It's on our district PR committee section. I don't know if that will be useful in that case, but I guess if you kind of start with a overview of what you might want to see in those sections, and then go find it. I'm sure a lot of what you want to put in as content in those 3 sections would be available on the Rotary International site. The Zone has links to, the Zone's also a valuable resource, and it's indicated on our website page as well. So those, another thing I just sort of popped in my head was Tom Smith in the membership areas is Rotary Right for You, and this may be included in your session, but it's a good perspective, kind of to start out and get people thinking about what it is they want to get out of Rotary. So if you check out that under the membership section, you'll see that like a video, I think, PowerPoint. I, without knowing the detail of what you're achieving in the, but it does come to mind if it's on it's a broadcast thing that you want to have, it might look at the videos that are available about Rotary. There's quite a few. And again, if you send me a message afterwards, I can try and help you out find some things. And there are people on this call are very knowledgeable about where to find resources to support something like that. And Sean Hogan, our Zone Director for Public Relations, he can be helpful as well. Here are the topics we covered just briefly. We talked about public image. Really, that's what we're looking for, because that sort of is the ongoing magnet, if you like, about Rotary, and the clarity of it, just simply people being aware that Rotary exists, let alone what it does and what its value is. And then the public relations, so then the 4 steps, the race model. So just wanted to point out, here's, if you want to make note now, quickly while we've got the slide up, but if you use that URL there near the top in yellow, that will take you to our website page, or you can find it under, it's a bit hard to find, I'm trying to fix that, but under the committees, in the drop-down menu, you find the PR and PI committee. But anyway, this link will take you directly there, and there's a lot of good information one way or another. In fact, you could spend ages going through all the material there and realizing what a huge resource Rotary is at all different levels. And if you haven't used the district display, for instance, that display booth is very effective. I think most of you may have seen it already, one way or another. So I think that's, just want to finish up by saying, for the good of Rotary, thank you as people of action for taking the time to participate in this webinar, and eventually to apply some of this process to your club's planning and action for the sake of your club and all of us in Rotary. And I hope to be working with all of you individually and your clubs in general to work towards kind of lifting our game, if you like, in how we communicate about Rotary in our various communities. So thank you and good night. And I hope you can refer to this afterwards soon. It'll be posted soon on the website. Thank you.